attorney has suggested that there is no way that Officer Waldman could have reasonably believed that his partner's life was in danger. This is not the case. Officer Waldman's belief was reasonable under all the circumstances. Consider the circumstances. It was night. The plaintiff's car had followed the officers down the street when they turned. The plaintiff stopped beside them when they pulled over to let him pass. The plaintiff emerged from his car screaming at the officers. When Officer Levy exited his vehicle to confront him, the plaintiff was wielding a knife. Officer Waldman then could very reasonably believe that his partner's life was in danger. By his own testimony, the plaintiff admitted that he followed the officers, that he tailgated the officers, and that he got out of his car and exchanged heated words with Officer Levy, and then engaged in a physical struggle with him. The plaintiff's counsel mentioned this medical record showing that Officer Morris Levy was treated for a cut or wound on his left shoulder on the night in question. This knife was found at the scene on the ground by the plaintiff. The Chicago Police Department orders do prize life. It does, in fact, say that this is a policy to protect life. But it does further say that police officers will not unreasonably endanger themselves to conform to this policy. And even more, it says that where an officer reasonably believes that the use of deadly force is necessary, he may use such force. Again, the circumstances that Officer Waldman faced: an attack upon his partner by a man wielding a knife, little or no time to make other decisions. Officer Waldman testified that as he rounded the car, he called out police. Officer Levy testified that he, too, called out police as he exited his car. And yet, still, the assailant continued to attack Officer Levy. Officer Waldman acted reasonably when he shot the plaintiff. In fact, Officer Waldman made the only choice that he could make under the circumstances. He didn't have time to call a timeout. There was no pause button for him to push while he gave great and careful consideration to what he was about to do. Instead, Officer Waldman drew upon his training and his 30 years of experience and evaluated the circumstances as being potentially life-threatening to his partner, and thereby justifying the use of deadly force in the form of a shot fired into the plaintiff. In this case, the plaintiff bears the burden of convincing you that there was no way that Officer Waldman's actions were based on a reasonable belief of danger to his partner. And yet, the plaintiff based most of his argument on the fact that he was not armed with a knife and that Officer Waldman did nothing else but shoot him in an effort to stop him. And yet, Officer Waldman testified that he called out police. Officer Levy testified that he warned the defendant that he was a police officer, and in fact attempted to control his knife arm during the struggle. And furthermore, the Chicago Police Department order says explicitly that police officers will not unreasonably endanger themselves to conform to this policy. Because of all of these circumstances, Officer Waldman's belief that his partner's life was in danger and that deadly force was necessary was reasonable. In light of this, I ask that you find my client, Officer Waldman, not liable, either in negligence or under recklessness, for the injuries sustained by Mr. Ramirez. And furthermore, because Officer Waldman was acting in the course and scope of his employment as a police officer of Chicago, City of Chicago, I ask that you find them not liable as his superiors for his actions, which were reasonable and based upon a reasonable belief. Thank you.